Hello everyone, welcome to MMA at Midnight. I'm your host Shant Yeretzian. In this week's episode, we're going to preview Bellator 200 and also UFC Fight Night. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson taking on Darren Till. Let's get started with the Bellator 200 first. In the main event, we have Rafael Carvalho taking on Gegard Mousasi. Carvalho is one of the most underrated fighters in MMA, in my opinion. As the Bellator middleweight champ, he's fought a lot of guys. He might not have faced some of the big names that the casual fans are familiar with, but he's a really well-rounded fighter. He uses his striking very well with his reach and power. He's on a 15-fight win streak, and he has KOs in his last 2 wins over Melvin Manhoff and Alessio Sakara. Gegard Mousasi, you guys know him. He's an elite fighter. He's fought everybody. He has finishes, not only wins, he has finishes over some of the best in the game, from Vitor Belfort, Dan Henderson, Jacare, Mark Hunt, Chris Weidman. So Mousasi, he's top level if you haven't seen him. People are expecting him to win this fight, but don't count out Carvalho. He's really well-rounded, and I think his striking style, the way he uses his range, is going to be a tough matchup for Mousasi, because Mousasi uses that nice rangy style for middleweight, and that's what Carvalho does too. But Carvalho is very more explosive and powerful than Mousasi with his strike. So I think the key to win this fight for Mousasi is he should take it down, use his ground and pound, and I think that would be his best way to win this fight. So this is this toss-up. I think Carvalho has a really good chance to win this, and so does Mousasi if he plays his cards right. He does the strategy properly and doesn't just go in there expecting to run over Carvalho. Excuse me. Let's move on with the co-main event. We have MVP Michael Venom Page. He's taking on Dave Caveman Rickles. MVP, he has that unorthodox striking style. He's got amazing footwork, timing. He cracked Cyborg's skull. If you've never seen that knee that he threw, he actually cracked Cyborg's skull. Like, he broke his skull. It was like caved in. You can see the pictures of it online. It was a nasty knee. Caveman Rickles, he's rugged, tough, well-rounded fighter. But he's a bit of a journeyman. He's fought a lot of the best guys in the game, but unfortunately he ended up losing to the top-level fighters. So, I'm looking for MVP to win this fight, get another highlight reel knockout. But if Caveman can somehow get a takedown, maybe like work the ground game, some ground and pound, maybe get MVP to turn his back, maybe get a rear naked choke, it could happen. But I'm looking for MVP to go for another highlight reel knockout. In the next fight, we have Aaron Chalmers taking on Ash Griffiths. Don't know much about these guys. I actually have to Google Aaron Chalmers. I guess he's like some British TV reality star. Ash Griffiths, 4-5 fighter. He's on a 3-fight losing streak. He's got the more experience, but as you can tell from his record, he's more losses than wins. So we'll see what happens with this one. It's kind of a toss-up. In the next matchup, we actually have Phil Davis taking on Linton Vassell. Both these guys, high-level fighters, good wrestling. They both haven't fought in 6 months. They both fought on the Penn State card last. Phil Davis won his fight that night, and Linton Vassell was fighting Ryan Bader for the light heavyweight title, and he ended up losing that night. So one coming off a win, one coming off a loss, but they've both been on the sidelines for the same amount of time. So we'll see how the styles match up. Like I said, they're both good wrestlers, so I don't know if one's going to get the takedown or if they're going to try, or it might just turn into a striking battle when 2 wrestlers face each other. So we'll see with that one. And the next fight is Anastasia Yankova taking on Kate Jackson. Anastasia is in a 5-0 right now. She's undefeated. She's got a bunch of hype behind her. She's a good prospect to keep an eye on. She has 3 submission wins. Kate Jackson, you guys might remember her. She was on The Ultimate Fighter. She lost to Tatiana Suarez on the show. So some of you might be familiar with her from that. So it'll be a toss-up. Kate Jackson has more experience in MMA, but Anastasia, she's an up-and-coming prospect. She's got a lot of experience that I think it will translate over. I think she'll do really well in this fight. So we'll see what happens with that. If Kate can mix it up, with the ground game, striking, if she can figure out a way to, get an edge in this fight, we'll see what happens. But I know I'm kind of favoring Anastasia in this fight to win. Crow Cop versus Roy Nelson was supposed to be the main event. It got canceled because Mirko Crow Cop injured his knee. So Roy Nelson is now the alternate for the heavyweight Grand Prix if it's needed. Let's move on to the UFC Fight Night. Stephen Thompson versus Darren Till. That's going to be a striker's dream matchup right there. Seeing those guys go at it. They both have good striking styles. They're unique to themselves. Wonder Boy, he's coming off that decision win over Jorge Masvidal. That was a good performance, but he didn't get like a nice finish that he wants. He always likes that highlight reel, like the knockout finish with that karate style of his. Darren Till, he also has a unique striking style, so let's see if he can keep the momentum going after knocking out Donald Cerrone in his last fight. So this should be interesting. Maybe if one feels they have an edge over the other on the ground, maybe one of them will go for a takedown. Even though they're both strikers, you never know what happened in an MMA fight. But I'm very interested to see how their striking styles match up, to see how it unfolds and what happens. That's going to be an interesting main event. In the co-main event, we have Neil Magny taking on Craig White. Craig White is a late replacement for Gunnar Nelson, who pulled out of the fight. Neil Magny's coming off that decision win over Carlos Condit. It wasn't the most impressive win, but he beat Carlos Condit. That itself is impressive. No matter how it looked. Carlos Condit's a tough fight, and for someone like Neil Magny who got derailed from his winning streak, to see him get back on that, he's going to try and keep that momentum going now against Craig White. Like I said, Craig White was a late replacement. He's on a 4-fight win streak in Cage Warriors, so some of you overseas, you might be familiar with him more than the people over the States. He's got good submissions. He's got a bunch of wins by triangle and guillotine. So look for him to maybe try and snag up a submission on Neil Magny if it goes to the ground. In the next fight, we have Arnold Allen taking on Mads Burnell. These are two European prospects, up-and-comers. Arnold Allen's got 12-1 record. He won a split decision over Makwan Amirkhani in his last fight. Mads Burnell 9-2. So keep an eye on these guys. They're both hungry. We'll see who's going to get the win. In the next fight, we actually have Makwan Amirkhani, who lost his last fight, that split decision, to Arnold Allen. He's looking to bounce back and get a win. He was on a 4-fight win streak before that loss. He's taking on Jason Knight, Hick Diaz. He's on a 2-fight losing streak right now. He had that TKO loss to Ricardo Lamas, some of you might remember. So he's probably desperate right now for a win. This should be an interesting matchup. I'm leaning more towards Makwan to win this fight, but Jason Knight, he might be really hungry. He might come out, he might surprise us. So keep an eye on that fight as well. In the next fight, we have Davey Grant taking on Manny Bermudez. Some of you guys might remember Davey Grant from The Ultimate Fighter. He's a British fighter. He's been out for a year and a half though, so let's see if he shows any ring rust, how he does in there. He lost in the tough finale to Chris Holdsworth, so he made it through like far in the show. He did really well. So some of you guys, if you're familiar with the show, I know not everybody watches it. Manny Bermudez, 11-0. He's from Massachusetts. He won his UFC debut. He's got a bunch of submission wins, so keep an eye on him. He's going to try and maybe grab a submission, get a win over Davey Grant. I really don't know who to pick in this one. You got to go with Manny just because he doesn't have the ring rust right now of Davey. But Davey Grant's he's an intelligent fighter. He's been around for a while, so we'll see. Maybe he can pull something off. So never underestimate him. I remember on the show he was a little bit. People didn't expect him to reach the finals, and he did. So in the next fight, we have Nordine Taleb coming off that head kick KO over Danny Roberts, which is really good. That was a highlight finish that he had. He's taking on Claudio Henrique da Silva, who's 11-1, but his his only loss was a disqualification. It was in his first fight ever. Oh, there goes my book. It was in his first fight ever, so he's on 11-fight win streak. I wouldn't really count it. I'd pretty much say he's an undefeated fighter. So look for him to make a statement in this fight. Nordine Taleb, he's a tough fighter, well-rounded, but he's had some injuries, some ups and downs, some wins and losses. He hasn't really been consistent. So we'll see if Claudio can show like this might be like his arrival fight. Come out, get an impressive finish. Let everyone know that he's arrived and that he's for real. Also, there's a lot of other notable fighters fighting on the card. We have David Tamer, Dan Kelly, Elias Theodoro. So there's also a lot of fighters on the prelims that you guys might have heard of. So you might want to check those out as well. Also, Bellator prelims, check those out. You know, you can watch them on their app and on the website. Good night of fights for both cards. It's going to be exciting. I'm looking forward to the Bellator 200. Even though the main event fell out, it's still great fights on there. I'm definitely looking forward to the main event with Musasi and Carvalho for the middleweight title. So you guys don't want to miss that. And the UFC Fight Night as well with Stephen Wonderboy Thompson versus Darren Till. Tune in for that. I'm going to be doing a post-fight show for you guys, so stay tuned for that. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, and we'll see you next time. Bye.